When Russia is causing this devastation in Ukraine, everyone wants Russia to pay the price. But when Israel destroys Gaza, nobody wants Israel to pay. No, Israelis are immune to this for one reason or another. But the reality is that for 2 years now, the European Union, European countries have been financing and arming a genocide. You should be ashamed for the rest of your lives.
So much for peace deals, so much for ceasefire. The so-called peace deal, ceasefire plan, or name it whatever you want, is declared, but a few moments pass it and the story rewinds once again. In the last 2 days alone, Israeli airstrikes have resumed, and once more innocent Palestinians are paying the price, victims of crimes. The Israeli far-right government has proven it to not be partner for anything right now, not for peace, not for ceasefire, nor for justice or anything else. How much more must Israel do before European Union finally acts for real? There are no words left. Time and again, Israel commits war crimes, and not even humanitarian aid is still let into Gaza. Do not let us fool ourselves. That's the reality right now. While we continue to debate whether to suspend a mere fraction of our association agreement, suspend the entire EU-Israeli association agreement, impose a full arms embargo, sanction the entire Israeli government, recognize Palestine, and the claim that Israel's war is against Hamas is a lie. The claim still is a lie. In reality, both Israel and Hamas are terrorizing innocent Palestinians. Israel claims that innocent Palestinians are collaborating with Hamas. Hamas claims innocent Palestinians are collaborating with Israel. In reality, Israel and Hamas are each other's best friends. Leave innocent Palestinians alone. And let's talk about the West Bank. Hamas does not rule there, so why are Palestinians in the West Bank being punished? Simply for existing. Every settler in the West Bank and beyond lives in violation of international law. Sanction them all, not just the most violent ones. They live on stolen land stolen from the Palestinians. Those settlers who hold dual EU citizenship should lose the citizenship. And let's call violent settlers what they are, terrorists. Because they terrorize Palestinians every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month, and every year. My friend Abu Hassan was one of their victims. What those settlers tried to do, as the Israeli military stood by and watched, is something no human being should ever have to endure. Do not misunderstand me. The initial step of releasing hostages on both sides were crucial, but much more must be done to put an end to the bloodshed that is taking place right now.
Merci, Madame la Commissaire, chers.
Thank you, Commissioner. Colleagues, Israel has killed over 70,000 Palestinians in Gaza. And with the wounded, that comes up to 200,000 people affected, about 10% of the Gazan population. Israel now occupies about half of the Gaza Strip. It's not that big to start with. It's about the distance from Brussels to Antwerp. And what do we hear now? It's time to ensure that the Palestinians de-arm. Because of Hamas, we need to de-radicalize Palestinians to be safe, to ensure security for Israel. Who needs more safety, the occupier or the occupied? That's the question, and you've picked the wrong answer. Congratulations, Madam Commissioner. 2 years of genocide, no measures taken. I think your whole commission should go home filled with shame. When Russia is causing this devastation in Ukraine, everyone wants Russia to pay the price. But when Israel destroys Gaza, nobody wants Israel to pay. No, Israelis are immune to this for one reason or another. But the reality is that for 2 years now, the European Union, European countries have been financing and arming a genocide. You should be ashamed for the rest of your lives.
Dans un contexte colonial.
We are looking at a colonial context, which always talks about the peace for the colonizer, but not the people who have been colonized. we have those who are the architects of genocide and colonialism. They see Gaza as a way to expand ideologically and politically. Since the ceasefire has entered into force, it has been violated by Israel many times. 17 Palestinian victims. Tons of bombs fell on Gaza on Sunday. The sanctions proposed by the EU seem to be now going to be abandoned. The EU is simply giving Israel a carte blanche for its crimes which continue in Gaza and the West Bank. From Balfour to today, the Western nations have systematically made the mistake of looking at the future of Palestine without the Palestinians. With one hand, they sign peace agreements, the other, they provide weapons to Israel committing this genocide. From the Nakba, the Palestinians have never known what the free and civilized world called peace. Those people who have been colonialized have never been freed from the yoke of colonialism. Nothing here embraces the destiny of the Palestinian people and their determination. Peace for Palestine means an end to the impunity for Israel, an end to the complicity of the West, an end to apartheid, to genocide. You cannot have peace without justice. Peace imposed by imperialism is an invisible war, a war with no name, but it is present in every act of domination. This agreement is just one more sign of domination from the West over the Middle East. Thank you.
Since the peace agreement entered into force, nearly 100 Palestinians have been killed, and only half of the promised aid has been allowed to enter the country. The humanitarian conditions are terrible, as stated by the Commissioner. In the West Bank, settler violence is brutal. The number of roadblocks is booming. The Palestinian farmers' olive harvests is being destroyed, and people are being banished from their own country. Trump's 20-point plan doesn't solve 80 years of war and conflict. Of course, it's amazing that the living Israeli hostages have been released and that several hundred Palestinian prisoners have been given their freedom. But 1,000 men, women and children are still trapped in Israeli prisons, many without due process and rights, and most of them subjected to humiliation. One of those who should be released is Marwan Barghouti, a man who could potentially unite the Palestinians. And it's important that he and Palestine be given a chance to find a common path of freedom and peace. And the EU should push for this, just as we must support de-radicalization and demand that war criminals be held accountable for their war crimes. Gaza needs to be rebuilt, and we need a long-term political solution.
Peace is not just the absence of war. A true peace delivers justice, freedom and accountability. A true peace, as we know in Ireland, takes decades of patience, of careful nurturing, of reconciliation and investment. It's notable that decommissioning of arms by terrorists in Ireland took more than a decade after the 1998 peace agreement. Last month, European leaders finally found their moral voice and began to see that they could influence global affairs. No one was more surprised than me to hear President von der Leyen talk about sanctions, or Chancellor Merz bringing an end to arms supplies in certain circumstances, and President Macron and others recognising the Palestinian state. So now the European Union must do three things. First, it must lead the humanitarian response, ensuring urgent access for all life-saving supplies to Gaza. Secondly, it must invest heavily in the political economy of reconciliation, including a major donor conference for reconstruction. And third, we need to use all diplomatic and political channels to make it clear that it is inevitable and unavoidable that sanctions and a full trade embargo will follow if Israel doesn't follow through with an end to the illegal occupation and a pathway to Palestinian self-determination. Thank you.
Yesterday, the High Representative Kaya Kallas led us to understand that sanctions against Israel could be abandoned now that aid is coming into Gaza. Now, I think this is a mistake. We are not dealing with a ceasefire. Since the 10th of October, 97 dead, hundreds of tons of bombs dropped in just one day, as admitted by Netanyahu, and only 300 trucks instead of the 600 that were envisaged. How is this a ceasefire? How does this erase 2 years of genocide? You cannot erase European complicity. You, together with Netanyahu, are erasing Gaza from the map. How can we forget how famine has been weaponized? The journalists killed. Even if the weapons fall silent, we should have pushed forward sanctions and suspended the association agreement and support the Palestinian Authority. It's the only way we can get a fair solution with two states.
Η συμφωνία που επεξεργάστηκαν ο Τραμπ και ο Νετανιάχου.
Thank you very much. The agreement drawn up between Trump and Netanyahu and approved by the US and Israel serves their own imperialist projects. Their project is for a new Near East. What we're looking at is a piece of land with the Palestinians there who are having guns held to their heads, while the other side has caused a genocide, and Gaza is going to be turned into a protectorate. We're going to have a territorial entity here going back to 57 and Jerusalem. The return of refugees, the occupation of Israel has already violated the agreement 47 times, the ceasefire agreement. We're seeing 60,000 plus victims of genocide. And what we have to do is not stop. We've got to reinforce our solidarity. We've got to have huge demonstrations showing solidarity with this people against this project, because the Palestinians need to be able to free of occupation and have a future.
On my way here this morning, I was looking at my phone, and I had to see yet another Palestinian mother hug her kid, calling him to wake up from his death. Yet another mother, yet another parent had to bury their child. And what can the EU play for a role for these people? My answer would be is to make this short lives of these kids and their violent deaths matter. And how can we do that? Yes, we know that peace cannot be achieved only when justice is served. That's why the EU has to first stop the association agreement with Israel, because we cannot be associated with war criminals. Two, we have to support fully ICC and ICJ, because these war criminals has to stand in responsibility and end the impunity on both sides, Hamas and Israel. We have to stop the settler economy. We cannot have products from violent settlers, stolen land. We have to stop the land theft in the West Bank and the settler violence. And there is no other solution than the two-state solution, because Israelis owe it to the Palestinians, and the Palestinians, well damn, deserve their own state now. Thank you.
Danke. Als nächstes spricht die Kollegin Vieira.
Next is Mr. Vieira. Ms. Vieira, sorry.
A peace plan that circumvents international law, a ceasefire that has already been violated, killing dozens, humanitarian aid turned on and off using civilians as leverage, Palestinians having no say on who will lead Gaza in rebuilding what Israel has destroyed, impunity in the face of genocide. This is the reality in Gaza. And meanwhile, in the West Bank, the illegal occupation grows, subjecting millions of people to killing, torture and displacement. Yes, much has changed in the past few weeks. A ceasefire agreement, the return of the hostages, more humanitarian aid come in. These are all crucial steps. But let us be clear, this is not peace and this is not justice. Colleagues, our credibility is on the line. What influence can we have with Russia, with any other state, if we don't stand by our values? We must uphold international law, and that means taking action. Suspend the association agreement, end all trade with illegal settlements, impose sanctions, and stand firmly behind the ICC and the ICJ. This is the moment to secure a path, a just and a lasting path that guarantees safety, freedom and self-determination to Israelis and Palestinians alike.
Μόλις χτες το Ισραήλ σκότωσε 45 Παλαιστίνιους.
We're talking about this so-called peace plan. Well, yesterday we had Rafah closed, lots more people killed, genocide is continuing, humanitarian aid has not really started to arrive. We need to show responsibility here. The European Union was tragically absent over the past 2 years, and Donald Trump came up with a plan for peace, but you have to look at the nuances there. What are we going to do with the criminal Netanyahu? Is he going to remain free, etc.? And after this so-called agreement, a few crumbs of aid have gone to the Palestinians. We need to show courage. We need to be brave. And we need to speak with one voice and talk about the establishment of a Palestinian state.
For years, many of you sat here watching Gaza burn, debating, condemning, expressing concern, doing absolutely nothing. Watched a genocide and didn't dare to call its name. Spoke of principles and delivered none. We failed the Palestinians, we failed the world, we failed the humanity. Recent peace agreement is the title of this debate. A peace for whom? Is there a ceasefire? Or is there, as Francesca Albanese said, you seize, I fire? The mutual hatred between far-right in Israel and Hamas feeds them both, while the innocent paid the price. The role of the EU also in the title. Where is the EU, indeed? Just yesterday, the Commission presented the new Pact for the Mediterranean, preaching stability and security while blatantly favoring the aggressor and just symbolically addressing Palestine. Is that the role we want to play? Watching human rights, humans actually, being erased and the world burn? All violations of the agreement must mean sanctions, isolation, consequences. So just act. Better late than never, but never again this late.
So what is the role of the EU in bringing about peace in the Middle East? Firstly, we must recognise the EU role in facilitating a genocide. We must accept that Ursula von der Leyen's unconditional support for Israel emboldened them in committing the most horrific war crimes. We must accept the EU's refusal to suspend our trade agreement with Israel has helped them bankroll a genocide. We must accept that in spite of Israel telling us they would do exactly what they have done, Germany continued to supply them with weapons until 2 months ago. So now the EU must, to make up for this, recognise the Palestinian state, end all trade with Israel until they remove their war machine from Gaza. The EU must also demand that Israel pay for the reconstruction of Gaza, because the reality is there will be no peace without justice, and there will be no justice until Gaza is reconstructed and Israel pays for it. Thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, the eyes of the world must not turn from the Palestine. The promise of the ceasefire in Gaza has been broken at least 80 times at a cost of lives, hopes, and in law itself. We need more than pauses in violence. We need an end of the occupation and all hostilities, including in the West Bank. Those responsible for the genocide and war crimes must be brought to justice in line with the international law. Accountability is non-negotiable. Sanction must be imposed. Lasting and just peace can only be built on the foundation of justice. Lasting and just peace can only be built on the foundation of justice, as I said. Urgent humanitarian must flow. The crossing must be open and the medical workers and journalists protected. We must protect the very lifeline that keeps children alive and gives families hope, such as UNRWA. Let us choose courage over cruelty, law over impunity, and a future where every child, Israeli and Palestine, can grow up free from fear. Time to act is now. Thank you.
Madam President, we had on the 10th of October a ceasefire in Gaza. These are people that experienced hell on earth for the last 2 years, but this ceasefire hasn't been as we thought. Hundreds have been injured since then. 11 people killed in the same family, a number of them children, when a bus was hit by an Israeli weapon. We really need to get aid to these civilians, which is still being stopped. It is completely unacceptable. This is not peace. This is not security. The ceasefire has to be respected and the EU has to act. Words are not enough. We have to put pressure on Israel so civilians can start to rebuild their lives. We need to get aid. We need to have sanctions in place, and Israel has to be economically responsible for rebuilding Gaza. A two-state solution is the only option, and the Palestinians must have self-determination. Thank you.
The announcement of the ceasefire comes too late. It comes after 2 years of genocide and courageous resistance of the Palestinian people, and we have seen an international movement of solidarity with Palestine. Over the past few days, we have noted that the Israeli government has continued with its policy of occupation, and that the announced agreement which we have at the moment really has to show the way to a ceasefire and humanitarian aid. Israel continues to hold this up, to continue the blockade, and what we need is a total withdrawal of Israel from the Gaza Strip and also from the West Bank. We need to show solidarity towards the creation of a Palestinian state and ensure that we in the EU work as we should towards stopping aggression against the Palestinians.